Hello, I'm Jeannine.
And I'm Elizabeth.
And we are two therapists here to continue talking with you about narcissists. And today we're going to be discussing intimate relationships with narcissists. So, as I mentioned, my name is Jeannine Vegh. I'm a licensed independent marriage and family therapist, and I work with survivors of narcissistic abuse. I also write a blog called discerninggal.com.
And I'm Elizabeth Miller, and I'm a licensed independent social worker in private practice in Westerville, Ohio. And I too work with survivors of narcissistic abuse and individuals who are in relationship with a narcissist, but I also work with narcissists directly.
And we're bringing this video series to you to discuss narcissism, to hopefully educate and enlighten you about this topic and open your eyes up to something different than what you might have heard about elsewhere on the internet. Finally, under our video segments, we are going to be giving our background information by sharing our websites. I'm also going to be sharing my blog, and I'm going to be sharing a course that I teach on Udemy that's for survivors of narcissists. So for today, let's talk about what it's like to be in an intimate relationship with a narcissist.
Big subject. So Jeannine and I discussed this, and we thought what we would do is share with you some real examples of what we have heard in our office from our clients.
And so some of the things we're going to talk about first are character traits that people have showed us that have created patterns, so that we've heard this over and over and over again. It's not like we've just heard this one time, but every time the client comes into the room and starts to discuss their partner with us, sometimes I'll even say, do they ever tell you that they're sorry? No. Do you ever feel like you're a little bit crazy because you're talking to them and they seem to twist their words around, and you think you said one thing and now they're coming back at you with something else, or they're saying you said it instead of they said it? So those are some of the things that we're going to talk about today, what that looks like in a relationship.
It's been compared to playing the shell game. Remember the shell game? Like you put something under the shell and you're kind of moving it around. That's often how people will feel when they are attempting to have...
Good analogy.
Attempting to have meaningful discussion, or maybe let's say, not a discussion, an argument, if you will, with a narcissist. It's like a moving target. It's like the shell game. We started here, but now it's over here, but wait, it's here. It's a movement. The facts seem to be changing as we're talking, and there's a sense of there's defensiveness. I didn't say that. That's not what I meant. That's not how I said it. And they're saying, and then they move the shell again because they don't like your tone, or right.
Or if you're writing a letter and you've poured your heart and soul out, and then they come back with, oh, you forgot to put a comma here. Yeah. Or something completely unrelated, or they focus on one variable in the letter that essentially was you saying something that they did wrong and you're asking them to take responsibility for. But they bypassed all the love that you've also put in there. I love you. I would never do this to you. I've been there for you all this time. I'm devoted to you. All that gets bypassed because you happen to say something that you're asking them to take responsibility for.
Yeah, I agree. Let's boil it down to that particular exchange.
Okay.
Trying to elicit an apology or from a narcissist, or trying to have them take responsibility for what they've said. And what I have found is people who are involved with narcissists become quite adept at articulating what's wrong or what their grievance is, because they've learned that they have to be specific with the narcissist. So they say, I'm upset about this. So they leave as little room as possible for the narcissist to kind of shift their meaning, right? It doesn't matter. they will still shift the meaning.
Mm-hmm.
They will find a way to shift the meaning or dodge what you're saying or deflect from it or be defensive.
And that's not fair.
Well, of course it's not fair. It's never about fairness, right? When you're in relationship with a narcissist, the only thing that needs to be fair is what is happening to them. Right?
And that's where you start feeling crazy.
That's where you start feeling
because you're
crazy.
like, well, wait a minute. You know, can't somebody have some sympathy for me?
One of the techniques, if you will, that I teach in my practice when I have someone who is trying to talk to a narcissist or someone they believe is a narcissist is I just call it circling, just circling back around. So you say, I'm upset about this. And they say, well, I'm upset about this. You say, okay, we'll talk about that after we address this.
What I'm upset
about. Well, wait a minute. When you say that, I don't like your tone. You're kind of coming at me really hard. Okay, I understand that. We can talk about my tone, but I still need to know that you're hearing me when I say, I'm upset about this.
Uh-huh.
Well, wait a minute. You were upset 2 days ago about something else, so I'm supposed to think about that. Okay, here we are deflecting, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to go back to 2 days ago. I'd like to just address this. Literally, it's a broken record.
Yeah.
And I role play with my clients on how to do that, how to stay focused on this one subject. Because those techniques that you find, those strategies a narcissist use, they are designed to get us off our point.
Exactly.
Right?
But I want to point out that it is so easy in a therapy room to coach somebody, but what I usually see when I'm coaching somebody is I see that look on their face, and I'll like that look of forlorn and that look of hopelessness, and I'll say, you're hearing all this, you're hearing me saying all this, but you're probably thinking to yourself right now that as soon as you get home, you're not going to do it. Because you're going to get home, you're going to look him in the face, he's going to show you those cute blue eyes or brown eyes, and you're going to sink. Your heart's going to sink, and you're going to start to develop, to give out the coaching that you were given, and then you're going to crash.
That's why I think the role play is so important. I literally will try on different parts. I'll be the narcissist or the partner, and then I'll allow them to be the narcissist, and I will mirror to them what I'd like them to try to practice and learn. But you bring up a really good point. So when we're talking about being in an intimate relationship with a narcissist, one thing you have to pay attention to is what's happening in here.
Yes.
Okay? We often talk about it as therapists that when we are working with someone who has personality disorder, often we will feel triggered. We'll get worked up. Okay? And it's the phenomenon of talking with someone who is being manipulative, right? So from a personal standpoint, helping somebody from a personal standpoint is helping them to identify what are they feeling when they're engaged in some of these discussions, when they feel like they're just being spun all around in this vortex of confusion. And helping our clients learn how to breathe and calm themselves so that they don't get caught up in what you're talking about, all the feelings that are coming up.
Are able to self-soothe when they're
Exactly.
emotionally flooding.
Right, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's something that happens when we're involved with somebody who has narcissism. We get very worked up.
Yeah.
People will often say, you might have said this to yourself, I get so worked up with no one else but them.
Mm-hmm.
I don't act like this with anybody else
Mm-hmm.
but my husband or my wife.
Uh-huh.
I feel crazy,
Mm-hmm.
right? And it's almost like that energy just engulfs you of trying to find a collaborative approach with this person thinking you're having a collaborative exchange only to find out there was no collaboration whatsoever from the narcissist.
Exactly. And also, I want to point out that the narcissist has created these patterns since childhood.
Yeah.
So they've had years and years of experience.
That's a good point.
So you and I role-playing with them in session, it's like their first time to hear this is a way to talk to them.
Mm-hmm.
And there's also a good book, Disarming the Narcissist by Wendy Bahari, that also coaches you on how to talk to a narcissist. But we're hearing it for the first time. We're trying to practice it when we get home. But the biggest issue is that we've lost trust in ourselves. That's what you were pointing out. We can do it with our coworkers. We can do it with our boss. We can do it, except if they're a narcissist. We can do it with this person and that person. But when we're at home, we've lost trust in ourselves. And so we do give it our best effort. And so from what the therapist is teaching you to do, so what I tell people to do is just keep practicing. You are going to make a mistake. I'm going to teach you, I'm going to coach you, Elizabeth's going to coach you on how to work with this person that you love, but you're going to make mistakes. The first time it might not come out so good. So you've got to do it again and again and again.
Can I add something to that?
Yes.
What I often have people do when they're doing exactly what you're talking about is to take a picture that they have of the person that they are going to be speaking to.
That's a good idea.
And practice it. Because the body will respond when they see the face of the person, even if they're not engaged in a conversation, in a real life conversation. So that's just an added piece.
That's a good idea. I'm going to use that technique. Because I use that technique when I'm talking about, saying goodbye to a loved one, or getting closure from a loved one that you've lost or that isn't there. I'll tell them to look at a photograph, but I hadn't thought about that.
I want to jump on something you said too. I think what Jeannine said is very important, and often we hear this from our clients who have been in these relationships, and the longer they're in relationships, the more that they're at risk of feeling this way. They come into our office and they say, I don't even know who I am anymore.
Yes, exactly.
I've completely lost track of who I am. What's important to me? Am I being selfish?
Yes.
And often that's how someone who's in relationship with a narcissist will feel. That even having the smallest of needs, like we can hear it, that their needs are not unreasonable, but even having the smallest of needs or wants gets framed with their partner as they're selfish.
Yes.
Right? So they keep taking away from themselves and taking away from themselves to the point that they don't know who they are. That's what they say.
Right, and when that shell, as you were mentioning earlier, keeps getting pushed around, you don't even remember where the ball is anymore, because you've gotten so lost in this dynamic, and you do begin to question yourself. Is it all about me? Maybe I have asked for too much in this relationship. But that's the self-awareness. That's what differentiates. One person has self-awareness and is saying, maybe you're right about this. Maybe I have been a narcissist. Maybe I have behaved that way. Meaning the survivor is saying that, because a lot of times, if you are silly enough to diagnose your partner and say, I've been reading these articles online and you're a narcissist, they're most likely going to say, no, you're the narcissist, because it's always being flipped back. There's no responsibility. So what I'm trying to say is that the survivor will try to take responsibility. They will have that self-awareness, and the narcissist is not taking the time to walk away from the argument and say to themselves, maybe she had a point there. Maybe I should go back and share that with her, and we can solve this argument. And that's what makes it tricky in that kind of an intimate relationship, because you're constantly feeling like you, the survivor, needs to apologize for things. You're constantly feeling like, well, because you get into that pattern yourself where after being together for so many months or so many years or what have you, that it's like you learn, well, if I just apologize, things are going to get better.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll go out to that restaurant tonight, we'll make love, we'll have a happy night, everything's going to be great. And so they get into a pattern, the survivors get into a pattern, and that's how they lose their sense of self, because they have become so good at mastering the art of taking care of the situation, cleaning it up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They don't know who they are anymore. And they've become so used to doing for that other person,
mm-hmm.
because hopefully this time, if you make them happy, everything's wonderful in the relationship. For a while. Until you slip up and try to hold them accountable for something.
Well, until you are accused of slipping up, right?
Yes,
Until you do something in the relationship that would be completely reasonable or normal, or, bring a beef to your partner, or you're upset about something. It's a reasonable thing to do.
Yes.
But whatever you do lands with the narcissist in a way that they don't like it. They don't like the way it makes them feel. They don't like the way they perceive themselves. And then they react to you. But they can't say, wow, I didn't like how that felt. What they do is attack you.
Mm-hmm.
And then, this is another thing we hear. This is another, let's say, more complex experience that people will have. So now you're engaged in an argument, or the narcissist is accusing you of making them feel worthless, or making them feel something, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they're just berating you and berating you and berating you. And this gets into different types of narcissists. Some are more angry, more malignant, what we call them. But let's say you're dealing with that, and you just break down. You just break down. You're just crying, and they've broken you down. Then they will turn to a different form of narcissism. They will rescue you. They will come in and say, oh, come here, it's okay. Let me hold you. Let me take care of you. So you have the confusion of, I just was beaten by you verbally, and now I get to come in and rescue you. That is a very high level, I consider it a high level narcissistic behavior.
Now, wait a minute. That kind of sounds like they're being empathic.
Right, it does, doesn't it? The only problem is they're the ones that took you down.
Right.
Okay?
Mm-hmm.
So empathy would be, I cannot believe I just did that to you. There must be, I lost sight of who I am. There must be something wrong with me. I need to get help with this, because I don't ever want to do that to you again. And they mean it.
Mm-hmm.
That would be empathy.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not talking about the impulse of losing control and saying things we don't mean. I'm talking about the systematic tearing down of somebody and then coming in and rescuing them. Because narcissists operate on a triangle, typically. And at each point, there's a different role that they will take. There is the persecutor, there is the rescuer, and there is the victim. And they tend to go within that triangle.
Mm-hmm.
And they can move very quickly from any of those points.
Mm-hmm.
So you'll have the persecutor tear you down, but guess what? They get to come in and rescue you. Okay? But then also at the beginning of that, remember this, they were the victim, because you were making them feel bad. Okay? So great point, because empathy, real empathy, is not a characteristic that we would find in someone with narcissistic personality.
Exactly.
So it's really understanding when they're trying to come in and rescue you, which is about them, and it makes them feel better about themselves. versus having true empathy.
Okay. All right. So I think we've done enough there. I just want to point out that we didn't use any of the terms in this segment, such as love bombing and gaslighting and psychopath and all that sort of thing. We're going to do that in another segment where we're going to focus solely on those terms. And but the next segment that we're going to be doing is going to be on the parent who is a narcissist. So we're going to be talking about the different siblings, the sibling set, and how that's broken down, and the different roles each of the siblings might play in that parental narcissism. So thank you very much for joining us today. We hope you've learned something from this episode, and hope that you will continue to join us in future episodes.
Before I sign off, I'd like to say one last thing. I recognize that we talked about some pretty difficult scenarios here, and some of you watching this might be identifying with some of the things that we described. So I encourage you to seek out someone like Jeannine or myself in whatever city or town that you live in. It doesn't have to necessarily be someone who says that they have a special expertise in narcissism, but certainly reach out to someone in the therapeutic field. And if you are in a situation where you do not feel safe, please take the steps that you need to take to find safety.
Exactly.
Thank you very much. Till next time.
Thank you.
See you then.